How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to the Stupid Questions podcast. Today we have another amazing guest. His name is Ryan Sosna-Bowd. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Portfolio Sport. They support clients all over the world, individuals and companies alike, focused in the endurance sports kind of a realm where they do lots of PR and basically just help them build an awesome portfolio of sponsors and corporate partners to help them achieve the goals that they have coming on. We get to dive into Ryan's life, hear what he was like as a kid, those typical questions I love to ask to get that why of who they are. And then we dive into a little bit of what he does and end on some really awesome pieces of advice on how to find what you love. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Ryan Sosna-Bowd. So where are you from? Where are you at right now?
From Canada, but I spent the last 25 years in the UK. So I'm in Cheltenham now.
Oh, okay.
For my sins, get along well with Mike. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
um, and he said you're all right. So I was like, yeah, of course. So
Yeah, Mike's a great guy. He was one of the early guys on the show. I'm trying to remember. I think he was probably the first 10, 11 episodes or something like that.
oh, nice. Like, how's the show developed over the years?
I mean, it'll be a year that I like from the first time we recorded, I think in July or August. So we're still growing. We're like episode 37. It's been going really well. Like every week we kind of hit a new high. Certain episodes they're, I guess, more popular. They kind of bring in a bunch of new listeners, and so it's been fun to kind of track those trends. But I was just listening to an episode of Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
But he was telling the story of basically he had started his podcast in 2017 and he was just kind of grinding away until 2022 was like the first time that it like really started to take off because he got invited on Joe Rogan's podcast, obviously, and then he got more downloads in the first 2 days of that episode than his entire existence prior. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in for the long haul. It's been a great experience. Lots of people to talk to. We've recorded probably close to 50 episodes now, and we got a good little backlog. So yeah, it's going really good. Thanks for asking.
Oh, that's really no. Oh, I'm glad to. And yeah, like I mean, have you kind of got a thought of what you want to talk about today, or
Yeah,
yeah?
yeah. I got all kinds of questions for you. So with the first one, just how do I pronounce your last name?
Okay, it's Sosna-Bowd. Um,
Sosnaboud. Okay.
Sosna-Bowd, yeah. But yeah, you can just call me Ryan. It's easy.
Okay, for sure. So what is the etymology of that last name?
So I was Ryan Bowd, and I am married to a amazing Scottish woman
Okay.
who comes from like a kind of a Polish background on her dad's side,
Okay.
Claire Sosna. And after over a decade of wearing her down, she finally was like, "Yeah, I'll get married, but I'm not going to lose my last name." And I was like, "Fine, let's put them together." And I took it as well. So we took each other's. So.
Sosnaboud. Good deal. Is that a common thing between the Scots and
No,
the
oh, no,
English?
it's definitely not, like I'm not the Canadian in me. Like it's not really a common thing. Like
Yeah.
definitely a few. Like I've got friends all over the world from work, and definitely a few of the guys in the Middle East were like, "Don't tell my wife."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. That's so funny. Oh, cool.
So, but yeah, no, yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the first question I have for you, to kind of dive in, it's a question I like asking for all guests, and it is, who is Ryan?
That is a really really good question. Um, I guess professionally, I'm now I guess an athlete and talent manager and agent. I hate the words manager and agent.
Mm,
Um, Personally, I think I'm someone who kind of defines life by making small differences in myself and in others, and I'm really privileged to have an amazing wife and family and people
mm,
around me, and um, I'm really privileged to work in like sports I absolutely love. So I guess that would be me at the moment.
yeah, good answer. So you said that you're from Canada. Were you born and raised there? And you said 25 years that you've been gone
Yeah,
now.
so I was born in Canada. I grew up in Saskatchewan and Alberta. So
Okay.
I'm like definitely Western Canadian. And yeah, kind of that very brutal Canadian, like truth and honesty.
Yeah.
My dad was British, and oddly, we both went one direction at 19.
Oh,
He
really?
went to Canada, and at 19, I went to the UK. Told my
Oh,
mom I
that's
was
fun.
doing 3 years of university, and never came back.
Yeah.
Um, and within that, like yeah, like kind of fell in love with endurance sport in that period, and that's been kind of the pathway ever since.
Yeah. So tell me about your family that you grew up with. I mean, you said, yeah, yeah, just that's the open-ended question.
You know what? Yeah, no, it is. Like I'm only child,
Okay.
and yeah, I was told that wasn't an easy birth.
Yeah.
But I grew up in one of those really like I guess like typical like North American neighborhoods where kind of from period 40 years ago when kids like your parents just let you out running
Yeah.
around and you and all the kids in the neighborhood were a big family.
Yeah.
And like you all played on the same like soccer teams,
Mm.
you all did sports together, you all did scouts, you all did all the outdoor things. And yeah, I think like one of the nice privileges of growing up like in the middle of Canada is it was lovely and safe and like kind of like the backyard
Mm.
of everybody was everyone's. So it was just nice to be outdoors, and I think that really kind of like honed a lifelong love of sport is just the ability to be outdoors and just enjoy it.
Yeah. And I apologize because I'm going to ask this again, but I know you said Western Canada, but was this more like Alberta or BC or where were you at exactly?
So Saskatchewan is like
Okay.
literally like middle, and then Alberta. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry, we've got a tiny little visitor.
Oh,
Come here.
I love it.
Sorry. Thank you. My little There we go. My little 3-year-old niece is over, and I've
Oh,
just got
so
a
cute.
I've just got a cupcake to make you very jealous. So
Nice.
you got pink bits on there. Thank you.
Oh, she's so cute. So do you have children as well?
No, no, we didn't unfortunately.
Okay.
So yeah, so she is like adored and spoiled. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
like,
for
like
sure.
my wife says, both the dog and her. I'm a love blind dog dad and a love blind uncle.
That's a good
So
person to be. Everybody needs that deep-seated love that can kind of see past some of the hardship in there.
yeah,
Uh,
but yeah, go on. Sorry, we lost track there.
yeah, I was just gonna ask about Saskatchewan. So I'm not as familiar. I've heard of Saskatchewan, obviously.
I mean, like, think of it as like flat middle of America is the best way to describe it. Like, watch the dog run away for 2 days.
Oh, wow.
And then kind of like home for me, like heart home
Yeah.
would be like Calgary, Alberta.
Okay.
And yeah, and then from from a sports and triathlon like journey, that was kind of like where I did my first try.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I think kind of it just was a really great community. Like back, this is aging me, but like back when mountain biking was becoming a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and back when triathlon was becoming really big, and it just meant that I was kind of like there to enjoy just like I'm not going to say like the good old days because it's
Sure.
not still great in those sports, but to enjoy like the starting days when it was
Yeah.
just easier.
Yeah, yeah, very much being a pioneer. So what were you like as a kid growing up?
Pain in the ass, I think.
Yeah?
I mean, like in a good sense, like, but but in that, um, yeah, like mischievous a bit at school, and
Mm-hmm.
just getting out. Yeah, always getting into trouble, spending a bit of time in the principal's office. Like it was odd. Like I had good grades, but I spent a lot of times in the principal's office. So
Yeah.
I definitely had the principal scratching his head around like your grades and the time in my office do not match up.
Yeah.
Um, so
Where do you think that was coming from as a kid?
I just think it's like energy you wanted to get out and burn, and
Mm.
um, yeah, and I just think when you're young, you're supposed to make mistakes, and
Yeah.
I think I kind of feel for kids these days because there's so much more on them to not allow them to get out and like just make mistakes, with
Mm.
social media and everything like that. But I think when you're a kid, you're gonna you're gonna get in trouble when you're gonna grow up.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have any memories from that time in childhood where maybe there were mischievous things you planned or pranks you played on your teachers or other students that you just kind of hold dear to your heart?
And I think most of it was like those things where you just kind of like you know get out and do things where you're stretching your limits. Like there was quite a lot of times where like like I had some great great people I went to school with that like pushed each other, and we definitely got onto the tops of buildings and things like this that you're
Oh
probably
yeah,
not supposed to get onto,
sure.
and I think it's all those things that just kind of like like allow you to stretch yourself. I
Mm,
think for me, like life is really about, we should always like want to stretch ourselves and continually kind of learn and evaluate. And I think like what I really respect in like the athletes, that I look at now and go, you're amazing, are the ones that are kind of continually setting stretching goals
mm,
for themselves and pushing themselves. And you know like, it's not because he's Canadian, but like, I love the fact that Lionel is like totally unsatisfied and
mm-hmm.
always looking for better. And
Yeah,
I think we've got one life to live, and we should be trying to do good and trying to see what we can do and find and be our best self.
yeah, for sure. So who do you think that you were more like as a kid versus now, your mom or your dad?
Um, I was probably more like my granddad as a
Really?
kid,
Okay.
and a bit more probably like my dad now. I like my mom was a great constant, and my mom's awesome. Um, but I think it was my granddad was like an ex chief petty officer from the Royal Navy.
Oh wow.
He, like, he was both like an absolute gentleman and also like
Hardcore.
the guy who taught me like, you know, not to throw a punch, never to throw a first punch, but also not to like walk away if someone was picking on someone
Mm,
smaller. And my dad was just, yeah, the smartest person I ever knew. So
mm,
and I think like a person to continually aspire to try to be. So
mm. What did your father do?
my dad did a mixture of like generally kind of like chief strategy work in companies. So he was deputy minister of agriculture in Saskatchewan for a while, and
Okay.
then he went on to kind of like be the chief strategy officer for a few kind of international companies.
Yeah. So it seems like your grandfather and your father were pretty heavy influences on your life then.
Yeah, I think I'm really lucky in that sense. I think that
Yeah.
it's, like I'm privileged in the sense that, you know, I had kind of two people to look up to, and two people who I think really positively like just wanted the best for me, but didn't have an expectation of me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, sure. Yeah, it's the best kind of support, not pushing you
yeah.
in a specific direction. So, but they still held influence. So I'm curious, as you were growing into high school and then eventually starting to make that transition to where you said you were going to the UK to go to university, I believe, what was that process like and how did they play a role in helping kind of guide you?
So, yeah, I think like through high school, like because dad sometimes busy with work, granddad was always at every game I went to, like every game I played. So like, there was that constant support of enabling kind of like love of sport and
Mm,
mixing it like with good values on education. And I think that when I kind of got to that crossroads that like most people in their teens get to, where they're not like, you may have thought you were going to do one thing and then
mm,
you realize it's a different journey.
yeah,
um, I think the most freeing thing that my dad ever did was just tell me that I could do whatever I wanted as long as it made me happy, and I didn't have to do what I thought he wanted me or my mom wanted me to do, or what like everyone else around me thought you should do. And that's really freeing. Like,
hmm,
when you are figuring out yourself, it's really freeing to know that you have support no matter what.
yeah. So, what did you end up studying to start?
So I played a lot of sport. I had a thought for a while of going into the Canadian Forces.
Hmm,
I like it was at a time when the way the Canadian Forces worked is that you got an offer to go to Royal Roads, which used to be the Canadian Military University, in a specific thing. I got an offer for a spot, but not in the branch that I wanted to be in. So I kind of just a bit lost. Took a scholarship to a school and realized that I had essentially taken a program because I did well in it. But I think like a lot of people, when you're making decisions about your life at 16, 17, you don't necessarily make the right one.
sure.
And eventually I took a year out and realized that I loved working with people, and loved communications. So I went to Europe to do a public relations and global development studies degree in Europe, and that's what brought me to the UK. It
Okay.
was to go and do something in a different environment, stretch myself in a different system, and look at pursuing a career there. So I did that degree, and then I went into public relations and started at a big American company in the UK at Weber Shandwick, and then set up my own agency
Okay.
with someone that I went to school with.
So that's how much time elapsed, I guess, like when you started working in the corporate world, and then you and your buddy were like, let's go do our own thing, because that's a big jump.
I mean, I did like, um, what was it? For me, it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Hmm.
For Mark, who had kind of finished university and went off and worked in a ski chalet for like ski chalets.
Yeah.
It wasn't long because Mark's one of the brightest guys, and I still work with Mark to the day. He still works. He still his agency now that he owns now still does the PR for the athletes I work with,
Oh, great.
and um and Mark's one of the brightest guys I knew, but I just interviewed shit. So he didn't get a job out of uni. So he
Yeah.
went in, and he loves skiing, so he went into that. And I remember calling him up one day and saying, "Oh, Shamrock needs someone on a temp contract. Do you want to come?" He came over, and like 3 months into that, we were like at a bar one night playing pool, like doing what early 20s somethings do, like
Hmm.
bitching about the world. And in that kind of conversation, we're probably like 99 out of 100 people say, like, have the conversation, like, oh, we should go do our own thing.
Yeah.
Um, by the end of that night, and then the next morning, we both had written letters of resignation.
Wow.
Um, and we had like a couple $1,000s between the two of us, and
Yeah.
pooled it and started. So
Yeah. I mean, that's again, like you said, 99 out of 100 people that talk about that, but it's like less than 0.5% that start and then obviously pursue it to where it can become any level of success. So, what gave you the motivation that night as you were thinking about writing that letter of resignation for the next morning?
do you know what? I think it was just it was genuinely a case of like the normal rants of like like account managers and account executives and big agencies. If we
Hmm.
do all the work, we're underpaid. Like we could do this ourselves. And I think the difference being is probably like both of us have a little bit of like the moment you say like like we could do this ourselves, where like I don't know, like where like bosses sometimes say, oh well, but you have to like go prove it, right? And we just kind of like said that to ourselves.
Hmm.
Well, let's prove it. And I think when you're that young, you also have the ability, because you don't have like kids, families,
Yeah,
mortgages,
you don't have a
and
ton
things
of
like that.
responsibility.
You also like it's two things. One is you have the freedom to make mistakes. I think the other one is just being brave enough to be willing to make a mistake. And like you always want to aim for success, but you're not always going to succeed. But I think I have huge admiration for people who are willing to either look stupid or make mistakes.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is nothing great ever happens if you're not willing for someone to kind of look at you and go, well, you're not as good as me, you're not as advanced, you don't know, you don't have the clients, you don't have that.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be willing to make mistakes. So
Hmm.
I think we were both kind of in the best sense of it, like young, dumb, and brave enough to make those mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Naivete is a powerful tool when you're that young and you have a motivation or a drive for something.
Yeah.
So you started, and then I assume you had somewhat of a runway, and like maybe you're trying to bootstrap the thing. But did you ever come to a point where you're like, oh, we may have to not do this because I need to
Oh
eat?
yeah, I mean, the best bit is like once we started employing people, we were in Manchester at the time, and obviously like there's two very famous Manchester football clubs, and
Hmm.
at the time where we were living, like we rented the cheapest house we could. It was big enough that like downstairs we could have the offices, upstairs we had our bedrooms.
Yeah.
Um, we met clients at a members club in town where we could just afford the membership, but it was cheaper than like offices.
Hmm.
And on the weekends, like Mark and I used to go literally to the Manchester City Stadium and work in the concessions,
Well,
like like selling drinks and burgers and pies, praying that like a client didn't come by.
yeah.
But it was how we could pay ourselves
Hmm.
while the business was paying people.
Yeah.
Um, And I think you definitely had those moments, and then you built it up to the point where those moments were no longer a thing. Where those moments were no longer a thing,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like it took a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights, but I think that you've got to be willing to do that. You
Yeah.
just got to you've got to back yourself, and that just means sometimes you got to be willing to put yourself out there where yeah, I mean, we joke about pray that clients didn't come see us, but at the same time we wouldn't have been ashamed if they did, right?
Yeah.
It was just, we would have just said, like, we're
Doing
paying
this.
we're putting all the money into the company. This
Yeah.
is how we're paying ourselves.
Yeah. So the
So,
business was an agency, but more specifically, an agency representing professional athletes or professional
no,
teams, or
so
what was the
like
business?
at that time, like career was like PR, and it was consumer and corporate PR. We very quickly picked up sport. Like I was, I'm gonna use the words like okay, under 23 triathlete.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna say good, but at least I was okay enough that then I like met enough people that while we were doing well at PR, we managed to pick up, sports clients. So at the time, we picked up the franchisee for Ironman. We picked up different people, and as that kind of progressed, we managed. We by the end of it, we were probably 95% sport and 5% like the normal corporate and consumer.
Yeah.
Um, and then we kind of we decided in like mid 20s that we were burnout, so we decided to see if someone might buy it, and they did. Um, and that I kind of then decided to go spend a few years lecturing because I'd done a master's in research as part of a PhD program at that
Wow.
like part time, and that was kind of how we progressed. And it was actually while I was lecturing, I was doing work for Gatorade in Europe
Hmm.
and on the side, and for an agency there, and an IMG's consulting division in the UK was like, how is Gatorade working with like a university lecturer? Why are they not working with us?
Yeah.
And after 2 years of trying to get the business away from us, then eventually they're like, let's just hire him.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when I switched over into the more sports management world. But at first on brands.
So what set you apart that Gatorade was willing to work with you and not IMG?
Joe, I think it's just like you're only ever as good as the last bit of work you've done, right?
Hmm.
And I think you need clients that like don't necessarily feel like always that they have to be working with the biggest. I think it's about the results you do, and honesty and transparency, and um, so like I don't think there's any secret sauce. Like I think people who kind of like I guess like pretend that that there is like a secret sauce to what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
They're usually lying.
yeah, and I just think like doing like working like doing good quality work passionately for your clients and effectively will help set you apart. And then then at different moments and times, like there's a lot of luck, right? Like
Yeah.
it's right moment, right time, right conversation,
Right person.
and right person, and that moves you on.
Hmm.
And like I feel really privileged to have like won that work and then held on to it so long because I know
Hmm.
that what that did for me.
Yeah.
What doors it opens.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's like a secret sauce. Like I don't think there's something innately in me that isn't in other people who do the same role. I just think it's sticking to your values, working hard, and I remember at one point, like then my girlfriend, like Claire pointed out that I'd work 34 weekends in a year,
Wow.
um, in the build up to 2012 for clients, and that's kind of like at that point in the career what needed to get done.
Yeah. So from the moment you decided to jump off with it was Mark, right? Your partner.
Yeah.
You decided to start this until the acquisition of the company. How long was that?
It took us less than 4 years to sell.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, we did all right on that. And we saw the value in being personally bigger as well. And then Mark stayed there for quite a long time. I went off and lectured, and then ended up in London by this point, it was kind of like beginning of 2009 with IMG, just in the build up to 2012.
Yeah.
So, which was a great time in sport in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So partnering with someone is said to be like a marriage, and marriages are not easy. So you and Mark, obviously, I haven't met him yet, but I can tell that you guys share some attributes, but then you have a lot of them that are definitely complementary, if you may. So
Yeah,
how did you build that relationship to where you guys didn't break up?
I mean, I think what was really useful, like, is we had like 3 years of university together to get to know each other.
Yeah.
Like we used to bartend like one of the university bars on like a Thursday and a Friday and a Saturday night together. Um, I think we both knew we were good at different things,
Hmm.
and and like I will always put my hands up to say like Mark is uh, like the one that kind of kept things going from a process perspective and like keep and making sure workflow was going well and like making sure we didn't lose people. I was great at winning and I was great at delivering certain moments like Mark, but like Mark was definitely the glue.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and and even now, like 20 years on, when we work together, like we both know what we are good at and what we aren't good at. And I think the other thing is like and I think it's a really important life, whether it's like as you said, marriage or whether it's work. We had a really simple solution to conflicts where we couldn't agree. And I know like it sounds really glib to say it, but we we would go and play a game of pool. And if we couldn't agree, the person who won. And and I know it sounds really like it sounds a bit glib, but it's one of those things that just meant like if you really had something fundamental that we didn't agree on, as simple as it was, we just had a process that was like, all right, this is going to make the decision and we're going to move on
Yeah.
from it. And sometimes the best thing is just like moving forward,
Yeah.
you know. So it's funny. One of the guys I work with now, who is a double over in the amputee, was the first one to summit Everest. A guy called Harry Budamagar.
Wow.
He talks about momentum, and he's
Mm.
like, momentum is not like about speed. Momentum is about maintaining a forward direction. And sometimes it's really slow and sometimes it's really fast.
Hmm.
But I think that's kind of what that pool game used to do when we had disagreements. It maintained momentum. And there's a few other times in my life where I've done things like like I rode across America with a terminally ill woman,
Hmm.
and we knew that we're going to have arguments. And again, we had a process, like agreed on how you would deal with those arguments. So I think sometimes like the best thing to do is just like have a process that you agree on.
Hmm.
That when you're at loggerheads, like sometimes you just have to accept moving forward in a direction that wouldn't be what you set, but it's moving you forward.
Yeah. It sounds like this is almost a way that you operate, having a way to when you hit a stalemate, you know how to move forward. Is this something that you discuss with all your clients and the relationships that you build that could potentially have impasse?
I don't think it's a conversation I've had with everybody. I think though it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, there's always a solution. Like, like it's funny, like every time before I take on now a new client in athlete management, I I do kind of say to them, like, before you decide or I decide to work with you, like, it is kind of like choosing a partner. But for that same reason that, like,
Sure.
you're going to have to be willing to speak to them a lot. You're going to have to, like, be able to, you're going to have to be willing to, like, be frustrated because, like, you're not always going to give them good news. It's not
Right.
like not everything is always positive news. Um, so I do think like it is good that analogy you used. Whether like in any working relationship, like is you are choosing someone to work with, and you've got to be able to deal with that, like the good and the bad.
Hmm.
Um, and that means like things are not always going to go your way.
Yeah.
But you just have to sometimes lump it and move forward.
Hmm. So I'm picking out a number of different values that I can tell that you abide by. Candid, honesty, just that seems to be one of them. The ability to continue to move forward seems to be paramount, like some kind of movement. And the reason I say that is so when I started my first company in college, I eventually came up with what I set were the kind of standards or values, the tenets of this company or whatever. And then when I ended that company, it was really tough for me because I realized like how do I disconnect this thing from myself? And I realized that a lot of the underlying values and tenets of this company were actually all they were just my underlying values and tenets. So my question to you is, what are your key values in the operations that you kind of live by that underpin not only your business life but your personal life and just how you conduct yourself?
I guess like as a whole, like if you ask me like what success is, like success really like in life is like outside of like the personal relationship between my wife and I and things like that, like success is like is looking back and kind of going like, did you make a positive impact on the life on someone else's life, right? Like, did you live your life to the best that you can live it? But can you look back and my grandfather used to say this? Can you look back and kind of go like, there's a person who is better because of the impact that you have made,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that should be like a philosophy that goes through everything as a starting point. I think that you know your ambition should always outstretch your reality, but it should be tempered by it's this fine line of like honesty to your clients, but also like if you don't let your ambition for them like outstretch like their current reality or the current reality, you're where you end up settling will always be disappointing. Whereas if you're always aiming for better than the reality, you're going to achieve something where quite spectacular.
Yeah.
And so I think your ambition should always outstretch the current the current reality. But that you should be focused on the impact you're going to make. You should be focused on like I think you should be I think you should be if you're going to work and then maybe with talent, like the biggest thing that I've kind of taken on a personal thing and around working with talent, which might not be what everyone else in the industry agrees with, but I think that if you're going to put someone on your books, you're making a commitment that if you're not helping them achieve that, it should keep you up at night. And I don't mean that in the sense of like not because you're doing a good not because you haven't done a good job, but like if there's an objective that you're working on together and you're not there yet and it's getting to crunch time, it should keep you up at night.
Mm.
And because that's the only way you know you actually care. Like I think that working with people and being an important part of like their careers or their goal achievement
Yeah.
is something that you know it is like you are fundamentally playing a key role in their lives, and if for you it's just a job, like means that you're not vested enough in their reality, because if you don't do it, it's their lives who get fucked up,
Mm.
right? And so it should keep like it. Sorry, I'm sorry for being blunt there, but like it should
No, you're
keep you
fine.
up at night. Like
Yeah.
I really think it should keep you up at night. And it also means that like you just have to like my wife always will tell me I'm doing too much, but you always have to make sure you're not doing so much that you're going to set others up for failure.
Yeah. How true
So,
is that statement when you say to yourself that I am doing too much?
oh yeah, like if I'm saying it, like it's definitely true. like,
Yeah.
I'm doing too much, like and then you got to figure out like how do you manage it, right?
Yeah.
Like without causing a negative impact on someone. So sometimes it just means adjusting other parts of your life and things like that. But
Mm.
you know, and also I think like if you're working for people that you believe in, you like the success, like you're filling yourself with joy in that process.
Yeah.
Like I don't like my job now isn't work. Like I love
Yeah.
doing what I do. Um, and I'm just trying to think of like how to phrase this. Like, you know, it's got to pay the bills. It's got to be profitable. It's got to enable me to pay other people. But I think that like the decisions that you make should be about enable like in this space is like you like my job. The reason I hate the word agent and manager is because like my job is being an enabler. Sorry
Yeah.
about the dog.
It's okay.
But my job is being an enabler.
Yeah. So So let me ask you this question. You are, I'm assuming you're probably in your late 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good, like good assumption, good assumption. But I'm in the second half of my 40s. Like I'll take that, right? Okay,
Okay.
yeah. So
So you've obviously experienced enough of life to really kind of cut through all of the, when we're in our 20s, we're like, yeah, I know what my strengths are. I mean, really, truly, I don't think many 20-year-olds know much of their strength and weaknesses. Maybe some, but you never have that full clarity until you're probably mid 30s or even older. Because I feel like I'm 31 and I'm just now starting to understand. Like, I had so many mentors be like, oh, lean into what you're good at. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, I have no idea what I'm truly good at or what I even like to do that I'm good at. So, my question to you is, since you seem to have this experience, what are your strengths and your weaknesses?
okay, I mean, like, I don't want to just, I don't want, I don't want to disappoint you, but like, when you get to my age, you will still be asking yourself what you're going to do when you grow up.
Okay.
Um, do you know what? Like, you know, I think, yeah, as you get older, you become more aware of like what you're not good at. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like like I can improve my time management. I could definitely improve my workflows, like an organization.
Sure.
I know I'm good at finding solutions to problems and thinking laterally. And because quite often, like for clients, you just have to do that, right?
Sure.
Especially like the current economic climate. I think I'm as an agency now, like we are looking for opportunities for our clients in a lot of different ways than historically. Like, if you think about like from a talent management perspective, like in athletes, like you historically be around the endorsements alone and in terms of commercial and partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're looking at whether it is things like content, books, documentaries, speaking, um, modeling, all sorts of different avenues, which will be different for each person. But it's actually, yeah, it's definitely like solution, like looking for solutions is something where I spend a lot of time trying to think about not as things as problems, but as opportunities for solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's inherently kind of been one of my strengths. And I also think just sometimes like willing to take something on because of the fact that it's amazing, the right thing to do, where others might not, because it's not going
Sure.
to be easy. I think like last year for Harry, we had to raise over $500,000 for the Everest expedition
Woo.
in a really tough environment.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud we did. In fact, like we managed to raise enough to film like everything on the mountain as well, at a broadcast level. So that was something I'm incredibly proud of. It was something that three or four people prior tried to help him to do and barely got $15,000,
Oh,
together.
yeah.
So, I think I'm good at kind of seeing solutions. I'm also good at finding and working with people who are better than me in other things. I think the Gatorade work was really useful for me because it meant that I got to work with Team Sky at the beginning of the journey and British Cycling. And, I think one of the things I've seen in great coaches and great team managers is that they they fill the room with smarter people. Like
Mm.
they are that embodiment of not being the smartest person in the room, and also being willing to work with other people and not being precious. I think you look at some of the most amazing coaches of things like heptathlon and decathlon. They are not an expert in each sport that they
Sure.
coach. But what they are incredible is finding people who are better than the individual sports, sending their athlete off to get those improvements, and then bringing it back and maintaining that across all the sports.
Mm.
And I think that being willing to win together with other people is something that is really hard when you're young. Because when you're young, like I remember me when I was young, you're like you want to succeed, and you want to build like your reputation. And actually, I think as I've got older, I've realized success comes from working with great people and winning together for the people that you work with.
Mm. So, what are your greatest weaknesses?
Oh, definitely time management, organization, and
Yeah, that's a big one. I guess you
overstretching
did say that.
and overstretching myself. Definitely,
Yeah.
they're definitely my big. Um,
Yeah.
I'm shit at saying no to people like to people who like are worthy of help.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So
So
how do you do time management? Do you just have everything? Do you live and die by your calendar? Are you one of those guys, or you writing
uh,
everything down?
yeah, I've got a lot of lists. Like I don't want to show you my desk right now, but there's a lot of
Yeah,
lists. They're like, I've got some great people. Again, it's like building a great team. Like there's
yeah,
this person called Debbie who works with me, and she does a phenomenal job of keeping like a whole lot of people's calendars in line. And you just have to. I think it's being willing to kind of go like, I'm not great at this. I need help here,
mm,
and working with people who are really good at what they do in different areas and being willing to listen.
yeah. Good answer. So I'm going to change gears a little bit, and then we'll come back to kind of what you're working on today. But when I was doing some research on you to figure out good questions to ask, I came across your Instagram, and you have quite a depth section of photography. So my first question is, what does photography mean to you, and what is it that draws you into it?
Do you know, I think it's my creative outlet. I think I love photography. My Instagram is woeful, badly updated. So because of that, I'm gonna have to like get on top of it.
Come on.
Um,
Yep.
but no, I love photography. I think like for me, it's a really great medium to be creative, and tell stories. And I think that it's something that I've enjoyed since I was little, and and it's played a really important part of a lot of trips and journeys in my life. I think
Yeah.
for me, it really changed. I think like I mentioned, I rode across America with a woman called Jane Tomlinson, and Jane was an incredible human being who raised a huge amount of money for cancer and children's charities while she was terminally ill. And when we rode across America, I the guys at Press Association wanted images but couldn't send a photographer, so they sent their chief sports photographer to spend some time with me and give me some tips to shoot while I was away. And I was lucky enough to shoot that all the way across
Mm,
America. And I think that kind of cemented like something that I loved into something I do. And then I think I'm really privileged enough that with the work I do, that when I travel, I can travel with a camera. And that has meant that over the years, I've been able to do images for my own clients when I'm travel sometimes, or like be lucky enough that a few years ago, I managed to even get listed as a Getty contributor. And I think
mm,
for me, it's just a really great creative outlet. And and whether it's sports or wildlife, it's generally like outdoors for me. I just really enjoy it.
yeah. So I want to ask you a question about a specific photo that kind of drew me in. And before I go into it, I guess a little bit just to show why I'm curious. From a very young age, I had the opportunity to go like to India when I was 9 on this trip and just get to spend some time with people who I otherwise would never have had even like the closest remote understanding to the kind of life that other people live outside of my own small worldview of what America is and the offerings that it brought to me. So I saw a picture of you, or that you took, of some teeth that were in the killing fields of Cambodia. And I know very little about that instance of what had happened in that specific area, and this was after a rainstorm, so it kind of brought these things to the surface, which I thought was interesting that you captured that. But tell me about that photo and kind of the story and the what you learned from that experience.
So that was taken on a New Year's Eve,
Oh
as
wow.
well. So um, my now wife and I kind of did some backpacking across Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and we were the group of people in Cambodia at the time, and it had just rained, and we went to the killing fields that day, and we were walking around, and there's lots of set displays, and there's lots of set displays of of skulls and bones and lots of things that just really like touch on the horror of it,
Hmm.
but they but they're curated, like they get a reaction out of you, but they are like displays with text. And I think what really and they did really impact you, but I think like that reality of like a rainstorm bringing teeth up through the ground, that really, like, it didn't just affect me, it affected the entire group of people that we were with. And you know this like for me, this was like early 30s, but for some of the people that were in our group, they were like 18 and 19-year olds. And I think what really kind of hit was like this fact that like a lot of the people involved in this like atrocious like mass genocide um weren't just the leadership, but they were people that were swept along with them who had committed these atrocious acts.
Mm,
And that like that visual of like these teeth coming up through the ground, being washed away, like literally on the ground that you were walking through. I think it was just a reminder of kind of like the darkness that's probably within all people,
mm,
when led the wrong way. And that night, as I said, it was a New Year's Eve, and it was like the quietest New Year's Eve of my life. And I think for those that were like 18, 19, and 20, where like New Year's is a really big release, and
mm,
it was just a night of kind of like pensive reflection that night.
mm. Yeah. So, what was the point of that whole trip? You said it was just a backpacking trip.
Yeah, like my wife had always wanted to explore that part of the world,
Yeah.
and from it was a chance to really just get into and see, I guess, cultures in a different way.
Yeah.
And along the way, it was really, like Thailand, like through the north, it's just like
Mm,
amazing geography. Cambodia, like is a people that are just so warm and welcoming, and considering to what they had been through.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was just a really great chance to experience a different culture.
Mm,
Um, and I think everyone should do that. Like, I think we live in a world where it is really good to get out and have a different perspective,
yeah.
um, and realize that there are so many different ways to do things other than the way like as us as like North
Mm,
Americans. There's just a totally different lens on the world,
mm.
and having that perspective is just really useful to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's harder to hate or dislike or even dehumanize someone once you get on the other side of the cultural barrier and you realize that it's just another human.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, pretty
Exactly.
powerful stuff. I have to check that out and get some information about that off tour if they still do it, or off air for that tour, because my wife has been talking to me about Thailand since we met and doing something over there. So maybe for our 10-year anniversary or something, we'll have to go check that out.
Yeah, no, it is spectacular, and I would definitely encourage it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for sharing about that. That was really meaningful. So let's go back to, I guess, a little bit more of modern day. Well, I guess we need to kind of complete the timeline. So you jumped off and you worked teaching for a while, and then you come back around and you, I guess, decided to start portfolio sport. Is that what happened, or what was the next
So
point?
so in 2009, I went to IMG, and I worked with IMG Consulting, which is through the Olympics, and got to work on some amazing work. Like that as a period in sport in the UK, um, yeah, was just truly special. Like the
Yeah.
domestic games, and I think like in the US, like those people working in sport, are about to go on the most amazing journey the next 4 years in the
Yeah.
run up to LA. Like a home games is unlike anything,
Mm,
and so it was a really special time. At the end of the Olympics, it was I'd never worked that hard up until that point in my life,
well,
and I was pretty burnt out. Um, and I spoke to kind of my boss at the time and said I would love a new challenge, something different. And my life had been mass participation, endurance sports, and Olympic sports. That was my area as a specialty. And he said, there's a unique opportunity in Qatar to take like your lecturing experience and your love of sports and major events and put them together as part of one of the World Cup projects, which was around developing human capability for
mm,
sports and events industries. And so he said, like, we're working on a project right now to help them do the strategy and the planning. Do you want to go? So I jumped at it as something different to do, and went to Qatar and worked first for IMG and then for the government on that project, until 2016, when my now wife's mum wasn't very well and you couldn't help on Zoom. So I came back, but I carried on working in Qatar on World Cup related work, um, from then until the World Cup in the end of 2022. But it was then in 2016 where we started Portfolio Sport. Initially as a vehicle to work with like a really wide range of kind of sports brands and clients. But in 2019, like I had kind of a chance conversation with uh, like an athlete that I'd sponsored quite a lot in the build up to 2012 with Helen Jenkins and her husband Mark, who'd become good friends. Um, when Helen was thinking about coming back to racing after two spinal surgeries, I gave her some advice
Hmm.
and Mark some advice. And the next day she gave me a call saying, I know it's not your thing, but would you be willing to help? And I said, yeah, like I'll definitely help you. But I wanted to bring on some of the thoughts I had around maybe frustrations I had, like as a brand person with working with talent and agencies,
Hmm.
and didn't want it to be a gym membership. I didn't want it to be something where like brands were buying something and the sponsor with the athlete, but they had to sweat it themselves. That
Yeah.
it would be more around partnerships. And so Helen and I kind of set off on that journey. Unfortunately, because of COVID, she got one race back, and
Ugh,
then that really kind of wound
blew it.
like blew that out. But we carried on during COVID, like trying to do best by the partners. And we did a good job of that. And even people who signed her for 1 year renewed her. And in that process, things I'd done in the past on my sports management journey, where I'd done some stuff to give back to the sport, like helping run a development team of triathletes in leagues and things like that.
Hmm.
It kind of made me realize that this is something I really enjoy. And I think probably, kind of midway through 2020, I decided, okay, the work I'm doing on the World Cup gives me a bit of freedom financially to be able to take another risk. A bit back to that first PR
Yeah.
agency moment, and I talked to my wife and I said that I think I'd really like to focus on working with like people that are really pushing their personal boundaries
Hmm.
um, in sport, and made the decision then kind of did a plan to build a client base in that space parallel to doing the work in Qatar around the World Cup. And, to really kind of set it off so that in 2023, that would be what I did 100%. So I kind of, the brand, corporates and government side of my life, I kind of brought to a close at the end of 2022. And by the beginning of 2023 was full time and, with kind of a decent client roster at that point.
Yeah. So how did you get involved? Because we kind of skipped over this a little bit, but you mentioned that going into uni or around that time, you were really falling in love with like this endurance sport triathlon world. So how did that start, grow, and then eventually, I guess, coalesce post Qatar Cup Games?
So, in a romantic sense, I'm going to blame Iron Man and NBC.
Okay.
Like you might not remember this, but there was a time,
When it was on
a,
TV.
a long time ago in a world far, far away, where on Boxing Day, the Ironman World Championships would be showed as live, but on Boxing Day as cheap airtime filler on NBC.
Okay.
And so when I was a kid, like just watching like Mark Allen and Peter Reed and people like that, just do just I think though I didn't really know what it was, I knew that like there was something really special and significant about what they were doing.
Hmm.
And there was something special there. And then mountain biking and triathlon, I kind of got into that as I got older. And and in that year when I did my first triathlon, I remember saying to someone like, and I was 19, I was like, I'm gonna do an Ironman. And they were like, oh, just chill out. You're really young. But like maybe maybe do a plan. Like you could do one in 3 years if you kind of did a gradual build each year. So through uni, I I I had a sign on my bathroom mirror in my house, like in my hall's residence house,
Yeah.
that said like you will be an Ironman. And and so in year one I got my first marathon down. Year two I got a 70.3
Hmm.
down. And then at the end of university, myself and like a friend from university who I dragged into the deep dark world of Ironman. We set off for Austria and did our first Ironman together in 2001. Yeah, 2001. Shit. Okay. Yeah, I am that old.
Yeah.
Um, in
23
Austria,
years. Yeah.
and that was it. Like I was hooked. Like I think what I loved about Iron Man was the spirit um, of it didn't matter whether you were first or last. Like you're all doing you're all pushing yourself to
Yeah.
be the best you can be,
Mm.
and it has changed. But like there was a time where pretty much at most Ironmans, like the winners would stay would come back to the finish line when the last person crossed the line. You know, at Lanzarote, the race director there used to be there for the first to the last athlete and award the medal to everyone in between.
Mm.
And there was something really special about our sport, and I think that kind of drew me in, and and that got me into endurance sports and marathon and running and
Yeah.
cycling. And they are great sports, and they're sports that have kind of filled my life with joy and challenges. Whether that's like running Marathon de Sable or riding across America or things like that, they're sports that continually let you find a new challenge and stretch yourself and discover something new about yourself. And I think that's what I loved about it. And actually, what's great about them is you do them with other people. You do them with people who are like-minded,
Mm.
um,
Very
and
community based.
very community based. And a bit like how we've met through Mike Bunting. You meet all these great personalities and people
Mm.
who are just good people.
Yeah.
And what I like and what I love about our like the sports we do in an endurance sport is like 95% of them are the best people on the planet,
Mm.
and the other five are just there.
Yeah.
So you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
so.
I love it. So then I guess it was pretty natural then post Qatar when you decided to jump off. You had the financial ability to take this risk. Do you focus mainly on triathlon or triathletes? I guess.
Um, I think the DNA is probably mainly around endurance sports.
Yeah.
There's a lot of triathletes. There's like ultra runners and trail runners and road runners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is track athletes, um, track cyclists, gravel riders, and then the other side of it is like people who probably have that similar spirit. So there's like polar explorers and
Yeah.
like Everest climbers and like trans-Pacific rowers and things like
Mm.
that. I think the DNA of everyone I work with is around they're all people that are either pioneers
Yeah.
or they're people that are really testing and stretching their human performance.
Mm.
So
So, what is the hardest part about what you do in this current role?
I'm going to say getting the money for people,
Yeah,
but I think no, I
that's
think the
honest.
hardest part. I think the hardest part is like is figuring out how to get the money for each person
Mm.
it's like there's some things which they're more standardized. Like if you take a triathlete, like the basics of you know they need run, they need stuff to run, they need stuff to bike, and they need stuff to swim.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's opportunities within those things. But like once you start moving into you know adventurers and like people that are crossing continents and,
Yeah.
and oceans, um, it's vast sums that they need, and it's trying to figure out what is the unique puzzle for each one that's going to do it.
Mm.
And we're in the toughest times ever. You've got like situations where like take triathlon and cycling. You've got the biggest names in cycling and bike brands struggling. In a kind of like a post-COVID bubble shrinking. You've got like global instability caused by the Ukraine and Gaza and all sorts of things, and all of these things have huge effects, on the industry. So I think it's about continually thinking about how do you do that, and then how do you create the partnerships and ensure that they drive real value for people,
Mm.
because that's the only way they're sustainable. And you are continually defined, like I think in this sector, by how good is the last bit of work you did. Like I don't think it matters whether it was in PR or whether it's here. You're continuing to find about like how good the last piece of work you did, and that's really important. Like it's got to keep you awake at night,
Yeah.
worrying about doing right by your clients.
Yeah. So I would assume by this point, Portfolio Sport has clients coming, like people are coming to you, or it's mostly referral based.
Yeah, I think because of the fact that I've been pretty fortunate that because of the way it happened too, in parallel to having other work, a lot of it was referral based.
Yeah.
So and which also is a problem in itself too, because it is really hard sometimes to say no, to people. Um, and I'm not a big fan of saying no to people.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Very large gun dog.
Yeah.
So yeah, like saying no is generally a real challenge for people,
Yeah.
and for me.
So what's the best part of doing what you do?
Like just helping people achieve, right? And
Yeah.
like and enabling them to do it. Like whether it's like a triathlete where you know I'm gonna give you an example. I'm not gonna say who, but like a new client of mine last year, I remember him being introduced by another athlete, and I was really stretched at the time. And we sat down and we had a call, and on the call he said to me, "Oh, thanks for taking the call. Like I'm not sure I'm worthy of an agent yet." And
Hmm.
for me, that was like it was heartbreaking because he's a great athlete,
Hmm.
and actually, what has filled me with joy is actually like helping him get partners and spending some time with him last weekend where we were doing some work in a velodrome with his bike partners, getting him set up, and actually just how excited he was for the year ahead
Yeah.
because he was going to be able to train more, put more time in, and more dedication, and that really was like something quite special. Bear with me. I'm going to close the door.
Yeah. No worries. Take your time. Let's see, 1 hour, 1 minute.
Do you want me to redo that? Or is that
No,
there?
you're fine. I'm
Sorry.
gonna
Fine.
make a little note really quick.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Don't apologize.
Um, but yeah, like I think for me, the most rewarding bit is like when you give someone some more confidence, you enable them to do something that they previously couldn't do. So like giving economic stability to someone, so that they can spend more time training and perform better. Um,
Yeah.
you know, like right now I'm working with a whole group of amazing people doing amazing things. And, you know, like last year was like raising money for Harry to go up Everest to be the first double-knee amputee to climb Everest,
That's
which
wild.
people thought was impossible. And there's some other people I'm working with that are attempting like equally amazing feats and, just getting them to the start line so that they can make an impact, and there's people like Sam and Tony Holness, who like Sam was the first openly autistic athlete
Hmm.
to complete an Ironman and an Ironman World Championships.
You represent him,
And
right?
yeah, I take care. I
Yeah.
work with Sam and his dad, and I think that like the right words are like with everyone is like work with, right? I work like Tony and I work together.
Yeah.
This doesn't like it is not me. It is a team that like does things, but the change that Sam is driving in terms of, you see social media messages that he gets and things where parents of kids with autism are like, I'm taking the bubble wrap off. I thought that I thought I was protecting my child by not
Hmm.
letting them go try the sport they wanted to try. And I saw Sam's accomplishments. Um, so I think there's like, those are the things that like fill you with joy, or, sometimes it's just little things like, it's just where you've moved the dial for someone.
Yeah. It
It
makes a
could,
big difference.
that makes a real big difference. And then that makes, for me, that means like getting up at 5 a.m. sometimes, or like working to stupid o'clock in the morning is worth it,
Yeah.
because, some real good is coming in, and it might not be good in like world peace kind of way, but it is good in making someone's journey
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Gives meaning to other people and inspiration as well. It's a huge currency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you, practically speaking, get a sponsor or like for or partners for these different athletes? Because for me, I just from my experience and what I've been doing so far, obviously being a smaller fish, it's like, how many people are you reaching? Okay, well, you're not there yet, but thanks for trying. So like, not all athletes have a large following. So are there other
No,
tools that
no,
you
and
pull?
do you know what? Honestly, I think like uh, there's so many times I get that from people like that I speak to. Like I've got some clients with huge followings and some with small followings. But I think that the starting point is actually trying to figure out like for who can they make an impact, right? You know, um, you know, they're like there are brands that need social media and
Yeah.
eyeballs to sell, right? There are other brands who have a whole mix of people. You know, they have people who have huge amounts of followers and provide huge eyeballs, but then they also have great engines themselves to tell stories and
Mm-hmm.
leverage amazing stories. So quite often it's like looking who are the people that are going to leverage amazing stories. And it's also looking at like where can they make impacts, right? Sometimes it's about making it's internal in organizations, right? You know, you've got some people who are just incredible speakers and can take the lessons from their life from sport and communicate them to people in a way that helps organizations perform better.
Yeah.
So I think with each one, you know, it's about thinking about what is something that means that they can make a really powerful or different impact,
Hmm.
and how can they drive that for? Oh, you, oh, sorry, your mom and dad is here to pick you up. Um,
Hi.
but I think like I think it is really around like what can you what can you do? So I'll give you an example, because I literally spoke to someone today. It's just a first conversation of exploring each other in terms of like how I might be able to help them and what help they needed. And it's a runner. She literally has a couple thousand followers right now, but great long term potential. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked her before we chatted to like answer some questions and send them through to me. And one of the things that she said was, "Oh, I spent the last 18 months doing up an apartment. I'm like I really love interior design and everything like this." So like part of the conversation today was like, "Well, like, did you record all this? Because none of it's on your social." And she's like,
Mm.
"Oh, I did. Yeah." I was like, "Well, let's like make some reels, tell that story." But actually, if you're a really fast international runner, but also with a really good eye for like interior design and like home renovation and things like that, I was like, well, we try to build your numbers
Yeah.
from
Yep.
a
I heard that.
consumer brand perspective. Like, let's go speak to some DIY brands. Let's go speak to some other brands who you're going to be a really interesting story because like in
Yeah.
one part
Different.
of your life you use that. So
Mm.
I think around like partnerships, the key thing is like honing in on what makes you different and where you can make an impact. And it's not, and as I kind of said, like it's not always you're a mass consumer, like or even a mass sports consumer
Mm.
proposition. It's about figuring it out, and it will shift during your career. You know, it'll shift levels, it'll shift like geographies, it'll shift the types of organizations
Mm.
because your profile will shift, your reach will shift, but there is always a solution. There's tribes where you'll make an impact, and that's the key thing. It's about figuring that out. Like it's really easy. Sorry, it's a crash statement, but I'm gonna say it's really easy to represent a champion with like hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yeah.
It,
Not
it's
hard.
really it's a more complicated puzzle to unlock the solution for someone who is truly great, but with smaller followers
Yeah.
and different points on the journey. But it's not impossible.
Yeah. Mm. Really good insight there. I'll make sure to clip some of that. That's really interesting. So I have just a few more questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So, how do you decide when to take on or let go of an athlete?
So the let go is an interesting one for me. So like not every relationship is going to last forever.
Sure.
So like like an athlete might decide to part ways. But from my perspective, like you know, if you sign an athlete, like it's for the lifespan of their sporting career.
Wow.
Um, if you only sign an athlete for while they're doing like
Well,
great, like you're only signing them for when like for the good times for them. You're not creating a real partnership.
yeah.
So I think for me, one is about like is how can you help take them on a journey after, um, but even support them through decisions that like might not be the most commercially like profitable ones for them, but are the right ones for them. And like I'll give you an example. Adam Bowden, who's a really good 70.3 distance triathlete. We got put together, we worked together for a year, really built like a great portfolio for him at that distance. But, he was in his kind of late 30s and he kind of said to me, he said, like, I've got so much time left to enjoy sport. And if I'm honest, I came to triathlon when like my track career kind of ended and it was a good opportunity, but it was a great career. I really enjoyed it, but it doesn't fill me with like the joy that running does.
Hmm.
So he gave up triathlon and is focused, like now he splits his time between like running marathons and then doing coaching and sports like PT, physical therapy and massage work. But he's still a client because of the fact that he's still on his journey and actually, he's still trying to be the best athlete he can be. So I
Hmm.
think for me, like it's clients will retire me before I retire them. Choosing a client, that's the flip side. Is like choosing a client is about finding someone that you want to work with and you're going to be willing to like lose sleep over to help them achieve their goals.
Sure.
And for me, it's about people who have something different to them. There's always something different in the DNA of them, whether, it's like, whether it's Sean Ransley and like achieving like success through Crohn's, whether it's like Tom Bishop, who, like has been so perseverant, like through his Olympic distance career with ups and downs,
Hmm.
and then actually has gone to middle distance the last couple of years and full distance triathlon and just found himself. But I
Hmm.
think you've got to kind of want to be willing to go on a journey, and sports not all up like all ups.
Yeah, it's definitely a
It
journey up and
rolls,
down.
but I think if you vest yourself in that journey with people that you believe can achieve,
Yeah.
they like you will help enable that and play a role in that, and you can be really proud of that.
Yeah.
Like, it is all down to them as great athletes and humans who dedicate themselves, but you can play a role in helping enable that.
Yeah. I haven't talked to many, if any, other real like agencies that represent, but it seems like this is just not what most would do, I guess is the best way to say it. Like the long term mindset, it seems it's almost Chinese to me actually, because I did some work in China and I was always blown away by their long term mindset and what they were willing to really sacrifice in the short term for not even the promise of an upside in the future.
Yeah, like I think you have to look at all your clients and kind of go like, well, I'm like, can I make money in the future? Because you have to run a business.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean all of them like you're going to make your money on day one.
Hmm.
Um, and but I think ultimately you have to believe in what they're trying to achieve. Um, and and things like and that means that like you're going to go on journeys. I'm always pretty like honest with people. I don't try to overpromise or sell or oversell things. Like it's interesting. I've lost out on clients to other agencies when people have like promised the world. Interestingly, I've got one client now and probably one for 25 from a conversation earlier this week.
Mm.
People who went other places where people just like were like, yeah, you should be doing X and Y, and and in my like being like like your ambition outstripping your realism, it's still tainted with realism. Like, I will always stretch further
Hmm.
than probably the reality for the person, or what would be the comparative reality of someone else at the same point in their career. But I will never promise like people the world that where you can't promise that. It's like all things. You want the ambition of the stars, but like you want to give them the sky,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 100%. How many clients do you represent right now?
In terms of individuals and projects, the agency's got 27 at the moment
Okay.
across all things.
If you don't mind me asking, how do you make money? Like, how do you
Um,
survive?
we are all commission based. Like
Okay.
some agencies charge fees.
Hmm.
I'm for me that's a fundamental no. Like it's something like any parent. Like I'll talk to tons of parents who are like reach out about like representation for the kids, and I had a conversation with like a young like kind of like under 19 American last week and his parents, and I just said like any agent that you work with should not charge you fees. It should be all commission based. Like if they don't back themselves to be able to make money like out of like doing your commercial work in the long term, then they're not there for the long term. And
Hmm.
also they also don't think that they'll make real money in the relationship in the long term.
Yeah.
So for me it's all commission, and
Yeah.
that's how we make money.
Yeah. That's really impressive. So, asking for a friend, have you ever represented a podcast before?
Um, no, but I have put podcasts like limited series podcasts into athletes deals with brands. So
Nice. There you
so
go.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So
Mike wanted me to ask you a question. I was asking him like for some dirt. He didn't give me any dirt, but he did want to ask a question. He said, "What's it like working with brands that Mike is affiliated with?" So
really
the Fruity
good.
Project, Synergy.
Like honestly, like really really good. Like what I mean by that is like I love working with brands where it's really good people on the other
Hmm.
side, and like Mike is a classic example of really good people. Like I think we're lucky in our sport that there are more great people than not.
Yeah,
Like it's a short list of people that like who maybe I don't think aren't the best in the world in our sport. But like the great thing about working with brands who themselves view it as a partnership, like there are brands out there that like view partnerships as a way to kind of like they want to get them as cheap as possible, get the
hmm,
most out of it, and rinse things. And then there are brands who get that actually like the support that they give financially and equipment and technical and human capital and time into their athletes and their relationships that enables the success of the athletes. So I think where you've got brands who kind of get that and are invested and care about the athletes and like Mike's a great example. Like he massively cares about the athletes that they work with. I think
hmm,
that makes like that's what makes great partnerships. And there are some brands that I work with on a lot of athletes, but it's because of the fact that we work really hard to as in terms of the athlete and the management team to drive value,
yeah,
and they really care about the athletes, and that makes the brand successful. Like the brand is successful because the athletes aren't wearing and using their products just because of a partnership. They're wearing and using them because
they're
like
supporters.
they actually
Yeah.
care about the brand, and they believe in what they're using, and they believe in why they're using it,
Hmm.
and they want to play a role in developing and making it better. I think like the best brands want their athletes to be part of the product development, and the athletes love doing that because they're vested.
Yeah, yeah, that's a cool thing. Whenever you see them involved with product development, that's always for me that would be like the most fun part. And I hear that from people who get to do it. It's really neat piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it excites athletes to be part of that journey. You know,
Yeah,
I'd say to any brand, like commit to have an athlete part of testing and development, and it probably saves you money,
yeah,
like on a relationship. Like I know
yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds odd to say it, but like athletes want to be part of the technical development, and
Hmm.
because they
They
know
use
that
it.
if they're part of it, they can contribute to making it better.
Yeah, 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 100%. So you have seen so many different, I guess, adventures or aspects, different leverage points on life. Like you've experienced a lot of different stuff from working on Olympic stuff, working with Gatorade, and obviously different types of endurance athletes and companies like that. So, what are you excited about that you are working on now, or you're looking forward to in the future?
Um, uh, probably probably too many things.
Yeah,
Like 2025 is going to be pretty epic. Already, like when I look at like the big adventures and stuff I'm working with, like 2024, like. like the Olympic, like there's the Olympics, there's the Paralympics, there's like Ironman World, 70.3 Worlds. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like I think every weekend is something to get excited about.
Yeah.
Um, and there's so many things like in terms of people's progressions, right? Like like in the last weekend, I had a gravel rider win their first gravel race, who is just one of the nicest like guys in the sport. Like Hugo Milner, like won a European Cup, beating like Vincent Luis and like running 29:30 and change on for the 10K.
Mm,
Like Sean Rainsley had been out injured, taken off funding, and won the World Cup in Hong Kong, beating KD and things like that.
mm-hmm.
And those little moments, like they might not be the biggest races in the world, but like they are incredible to see, because you just see these people who are outstanding human beings, like achieving.
Yeah.
And I think like
It's
that's the thing.
encouraging.
It's the privilege of being able to play a small role in outstanding human beings achieving.
Mm. So, one final question. You talked earlier about how what you do, you love, like you never work a day in your life. And it is a common question of people internally, like, what do I love or how do I find that? So, give us some advice for how to find the work that you love.
That's a really good question. I think it's like be brave enough to go for it. And I guess the thing about that is like I think I think that there's a lot of defining moments about like in terms of like what I've really been able to enjoy in life, which have required just like being brave enough to fail, being brave enough to look stupid, and like being brave enough to take a risk.
Mm,
And backing yourself. Like I'm a real believer in like self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, you know, if you set a goal and you keep telling yourself that you're going to achieve it, and are willing to learn and adapt and evolve, like it's really stupid to say you're going to achieve something and then but not do any work, because you're never going to
mm-hmm.
achieve it. But there is a thing about setting a goal and then listening. Like one of my clients, she just became the fastest woman ever to the South Pole. She says that like the thing that makes her successful is being teachable. um and I think that's a really amazing insight
Mm,
into life, that you're never too old to learn.
mm,
And I think like you have to set goals that stretch you, and then you have to be willing to do the learning, the adaptation, the training to do it. And actually, like, something I said to someone earlier today, that every one of my clients teaches me something. You know, like
mm,
you know, like Preet talks about being teachable. Harry talks about like adaptation. So many things that you get by just learning and listening. And I think that really helps you like set goals, be willing to evolve to achieve
mm,
them, and just do like do something that is going to excite you,
mm,
um, and give you kind of like purpose, and make it more than about yourself.
mm,
I think when I was young, like if you go back on my LinkedIn, there's tons of awards and things like that, because like I wanted things to tell me that I was great.
mm,
Um, and I think age has taught me that like being great isn't about like how many awards like you win, uh, by putting yourself forward for awards, or like people nominating you. Like awards are great and recognition is great, but actually, I think the big lesson is like it being playing a role that isn't all about you, and being part of something bigger than yourself
mm,
will fill you with a massive amount of joy, and you'll end up successful.
mm.
You kind of look back and be like, oh shit. But it's not being driven. It's not by being driven by it.
Yeah.
It's like driven by like playing a role that makes something great happen.
Mm.
Sorry, I rambled on there.
No, I think that was really good. A good thing to end on. It's amazing because when we get awards, I think oftentimes it's like a very short-lived thing. You like, oh, I received this thing. You feel great in the moment, but then you get back home and you look at that trophy and you have this level of self-doubt, and the critical inner voice comes out, and then you're chasing the next trophy in hopes that you'll believe the truth that it can bestow upon you that you are actually great. So I think that, yeah, as we get older, if you can realize that you are worth it, you are valuable, and that you
Yeah.
don't need those awards necessarily to tell you that, then that's true freedom.
Yeah. And there's a win in everything, even not winning, right?
Mm,
Like there's a learning in everything that'll move you forward.
yeah,
So,
good deal. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on
so thank you.
and talking to me and telling me your story. I feel like we only uncovered a few grains of sand in a vast desert of many
Uh,
accomplishments. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. Do you know what? I'm honest. Like, it wasn't the chat I thought I was going to have, but I really enjoyed it. So,
Yeah.
I hope there's something there for you. No offense if there isn't,
No, there is.
and it's cutting room floor. But listen, I really enjoyed that. I'll send Mike a WhatsApp now as well.
Okay, good deal.
All
Yeah,
right.
thank you so
Cheers.
much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much to Ryan for coming on the podcast and allowing me to dive into a bit of why he is who he is and what he does. Just wanted to leave you with this last little piece of nugget. If you do what you've always did, you will get what you always got. So remember, where you focus is where you will go. If you made it to this point in the podcast, though, just want to say thank you so much for doing so. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, subscribe, comment, a review on any of the platforms that you find, that would make just a huge difference to us as we continue to grow and build out our network. So thank you so much for that. If you want to be a part of the community, you can go and sign up at our newsletter, stupidquestions.show. There's a link at the very top of the website to sign up for that newsletter, as well as at the very bottom of the website. If you have any questions, please send them in. You can do so on the Spotify platform. All right. We will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for listening in. And remember, like I said, if you do what you always did, you'll get what you've always got.